Okay, I think we're ready to get rolling. Please give us questions as needed if you're having technical difficulties, but let's get this show on the road. So, hi, welcome to the HMIS System Admin monthly webinar. Just to remind you, you should be here if you are an HMIS lead for your COC or an HMIS system administrator for your COC. You might also be involved in ESG/CV work locally and connected to the uploads to Sage. You might have also been assigned by somebody in your COC to participate in this call. So welcome, welcome. We are happy to have you here. Our webinar is now available publicly on the HUD Exchange. So you would get the notice of the webinar this morning, if you signed up for the system admin list. We try and have enough disclaimers that, only sign up for that list if this is the role that you play for your community. But I did put a little quick test on the screen because we certainly don't want you here if it's not a good use of your time and you're not really deep in the HMIS world that we are all in. So please take a moment to just make sure you're in the right place. We're happy to have everyone who joined us today and looking forward to a great webinar. Thanks for being here. Just a few reminders. Jesse asked a great question already about whether there will be a PowerPoint presentation or not, and there will be available to you on the HUD Exchange. We are able to post that within a week of this call, so it will get up there and we'll send a listserv through that same listserv, HUD Exchange listserv message when that is posted, all the materials. You'll get the recording, the webinar slides, the Q&A, and a transcript of this call. So hoping that gets to you as soon as we can pull that together. Just remember that you're all muted during this call too. We are recording this and we really would love your help in getting the accurate answers out to you during the course of the call. So both during the call and after the call, please do your best to give us the context of your question, maybe reference a slide number or a topic that you're asking about if it isn't really clear what it is you're asking. We may ask you to go enter an AAQ after the call if it's a deeper question or something we can't get to right away on this call. So to do that, you would enter an AAQ and again, just try and reference those slide numbers or some sort of context or say that you were participating in the system admin call and you have a question or were asked to submit a question to the AAQ. Whatever you can do will help us give you the best answers possible. Okay, all the housekeeping is done and I'd love to just take a moment to say welcome to Fran. She, they pronouns. She's our staff's office, HUD staff, Meredith, Allspa from Partnership Center, she, her pronouns. Jesse Jorstad from Apt Associates, he, him pronouns. I'm Mary Schwartz from Apt Associates, she, her pronouns. And Melissa with them is on the back end helping us with tech support. She, her pronouns from C4 Innovations. And this is actually Melissa's last call today with us. So we'll go over at the end of the slide deck kind of what you can expect in September when we gather back together again. But we do want to just make sure to say real fast, thanks, Melissa. You've been great, and we've appreciated your time on this call with us. Okay, so the agenda is big today. It has a lot of topics to cover, but not all of them are long or will take much time. I'm guessing that we actually will have plenty of time at the end for answering your questions. And let's get rolling. We're going to talk about the CARES Act Virtual Conference, comparable databases again. We had said that's probably going to be a topic on these calls for a while. We're going to talk about fall in HSBC, the Data Assessment Maturity Tool, Data Analytics On Demand course, and new HMIS Lead products available to you, all those great tools that HUD has been furiously trying to get out there. On the lead and technical update side, we're going to just remind you of data standard stuff that's happening, ESG project setup, some new information there. We're ready to kind of bring LSA back into the conversation as we gear up for fall and winter reporting. So we'll talk a little bit about LSA. I'm going to go over what to expect in September when we come back together. We're taking August off, but when we get back together in September, it'll be a new web platform and everything, and we'll just do a reminder of the foundational materials for HMIS leads and system admins that are out there already for you in combination with all the other resources that we've offered. So, Brian, take it away.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for joining and all the hard work that you guys are doing and continue to do. We appreciate you. I have a lot to go over, more so than I usually do. It hopefully won't take too long. So we're going to start off talking about the CARES Act virtual conference. This is exciting. So this conference is going to be a culmination of different sources of funding through CARES Act. So this is CDBG, HOPWA, and ESG, and it covers a wide range of sessions. So you'll join for 2 days, it's free, and it covers all kinds of things like monitoring and how to manage these funds, how to best utilize these funds together. So I think it's really beneficial, especially if you have those funds and you have questions about eligibility and activities and how to best leverage them. I encourage you to join. There's a link for this also. If you go onto the HUD Exchange, you can find that information there also. And that is July 27th and 28th, so that's coming up quickly. And it is 2 full days. So I want to talk about comparable databases. I said that I'm going to keep this on the kind of top of our agenda for a couple months because there's a lot of things that have happened around comparable databases, and I think it's important for people to keep hearing this information, and we may have new people joining who haven't heard it. So there's a little bit of new stuff I'm going to add today to the conversation. So just to go over some of the old stuff, we always get questions about, do I have to use a comparable database or don't I? And so we have this decision tree that helps projects trying to determine, do I have to use one or do I not have to use one? So that's an important resource to go and check and kind of walk through the steps to figure it out. But basically, if you're a victim service provider, depending on the source of funding that you have coming in, you may have to use a comparable database. And the comparable databases are comparable to an HMIS, so it has basically all of the same requirements, and we'll go over that in just a second. But there's an obligation around comparable database. There's a responsibility both for the COCs and the victim service providers. So that's what you're seeing on this next slide, is both the COC and the victim service provider have to ensure that they're using a compliant comparable database. And the thing that's really important for us to make sure communities understand is, HUD does not have, and this goes for both in the HMIS world and in the comparable database world, HUD does not certify software. What we do is we provide standards and information and guidance around those standards, but we leave it to the communities to make determinations on the software that they select. Does it meet those standards? So we try to provide you with as much information as we can so you can use your judgment and determine whether what you're using is actually compliant to those standards. Not all vendors and software meet those all of the time. Sometimes software has bugs. Maybe there's been a little misinterpretation of some of the logic behind something. But as long as we have vendors that are working to fix those and correct them when needed, and getting back on course and getting those back into compliance, that's great. That's what we want to see. And if victim service provider discovers that they are on a system that's not compliant and the vendor is not working towards getting compliant, then absolutely the victim service provider has to move off of that system and get onto a system that is compliant. So that's what a lot of this is about. But what we want to make sure always at the heart of this is that the COC and the victim service provider are working together to support each other through this process and making determinations of, is the software that's being used actually meeting all of the federal requirements. So on the resource list, you see 3 documents there that are very helpful. One is that decision tree I just talked about. One is a manual that explains all the things that I've kind of gone over very briefly, and the checklist that lists out all of the requirements. this is what the checklist looks like. It's a short screenshot. One of the things to know about this is one very specific thing is that's just been released to the field offices and will now be, if you submit an AAQ, you will get a response on this, is that if you are asking for an exception when submitting an APR or a CAPR in the future, because the software that you use is not able to produce one, and we've had this happen for victim service providers over the years, is that they'll be on a software that is not able to produce an APR or CAPR that's able to be uploaded and saved. And this happens for HMIS too on occasion, but historically, HUD has evaluated whether an exception is offered, and it may in some cases offer an exception. In the future, to offer an exception to a community, what HUD is going to ask for is a written document that indicates the time frame around when the software will get into compliance with the standards. And that document will be submitted to the field office and the desk office here at HUD headquarters before the exception is offered. So that is something new. Being out of compliance, being on a system that is not meeting standards could ultimately end up jeopardizing project's funding, and we don't want to see that. So we offer a lot of technical support and assistance to victim service provider organizations and COCs and vendors. And so, there's both the manuals, but there's also, you can reach out and submit AAQs, you can ask for technical assistance, and we encourage you to do that. We're very excited to be working with victim service providers and COCs to help people along and kind of resolving these issues and getting onto comparable databases that are really supporting their needs. I'm sure there may be some questions that will come in around this, and I'll be happy to answer those. I'm going to go ahead and finish up these slides, and then we can open it up for questions for me after that. NHSDC is going to be in person this year. That's exciting. In the fall, Atlanta, Georgia. Today is very important because today they close out their call for proposals. It's at 8 p.m. today. So if you have something exciting to share, and I strongly encourage you that if you have a best practice, something unique, something that you've been doing that's successful, or even something that you tried and is not working and you're trying something different and you want to share your experience because you think it's valuable, submit a proposal into NHSDC, and you can visit their website for more information. There's two tools that are coming out that are going to go live very quickly. One is the Data Maturity Assessment tool. This is a tool that is meant for COCs, and it is an online tool that will store in a self-assessment that they can complete. And what it is doing is it's looking at 4 components that we believe kind of assesses where communities at and being able to use data to inform decision making and build community buy-in and actually use the data to change what's going on to inform homeless service strategies. So it covers things like data quality, data analytics capacity, data leadership, data-informed system improvement. And basically you're going in there, you're asking some questions, and when you finish asking the questions, you get something that's like a response of, these are the things I'm doing well, that I'm excelling in, and these are areas that I need improvement. You store this over time, you can go back and answer these questions again, and so your responses, you'll see, will adjust over time. But what's interesting about this is on those things that you find you need improvement, you can actually go in and flex some of those items as a priority, and it will generate resources that are specific to those needs, and then you can start utilizing those. So if you selected data quality as something that you specifically wanted to focus on, then it would pull up some resources specifically to address that. So here in this example, you see the COC data quality brief, you see the data quality worksheet, and you see an example of a data quality plan from West Virginia. There's also an ability to do an action plan out of this, and you can look at all of the sample documents if you wanted to. You could just go to that and see the whole example. The second thing is the Data Analytics On-Demand course. I mentioned this before. This is a 6-module, 8-week self-paced course. It's going to start August 2nd, so it's right around the corner. We encourage you to sign up for it. 200 spots. I can say I have gone through all of the modules. They're excellent. They're really meant for people who maybe not, you don't have to have a lot of Excel knowledge. You just need to have access to a data set. It's intended for people who don't have a lot of analytic skills already. Maybe they're COC folks that you're really thinking if they knew how to use data well, if they had some insights, they might actually be able to take some of this HMIS data and use it in a more informed way in their community and start leveraging it more for the decisions that they have to make. So this is not just for HMIS system administrators. Don't think of it in that way. Think of it as anybody in your community that really could benefit from having data analytics knowledge. There's 200 seats, and we will rerun this again, and there'll be another 200 seats. And yeah, I think this is a really exciting opportunity. There are TA providers connected to it. There's homework. You'll be able to interact with folks, ask questions if you get stuck on things. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. I encourage folks to take advantage of it. This is an example of like, this is right before you get into a video. You get resources. It describes what you're going to do. You're going to go through a video that kind of walks you things through different steps of, okay, here's how you pull data. Here's what you do with the data. This is what you're looking at, why you're choosing what you're choosing. These are how all the pieces fit together. And then when you're all done, you get a certificate of completion. So Aurora, and our sample example of certification would receive a certification at the end of this course. And then we do have 2 HMIS lead series documents. That means 8 of our 9 documents are out there in the wild. This one's on Staffing Resource Toolkit. This was an update from the 2010 document and the HMIS training guide. Both of those I think are very helpful. And I would encourage people to get out there and take a look at those. And I'm going to open it up for questions. I don't know if any have come in that I should answer. I don't know, Mary or anybody, if you want to shoot questions to me, or I can turn it over to Meredith.
Yeah, I think we're ready to go. Let's see. There was a question about if BSP databases are found to be non-compliant in the middle of like a funding cycle or whatever, will there be funding available to purchase new databases and all that? So I think the answer is we can't speak to future funding rounds, right? There's no way to say yes or no to funding questions. But if you want to address that any further, Fran, I think that was the only one hanging out there.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Thanks.
Okay. Meredith, you want to start with would you like to get going with the HMIS technical updates?
Thank you. So hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Like Mary said, wanted to give you a quick update. I know everyone is very anxiously awaiting anything related to the data standards at this point. But so sort of where we are at this point right now, there are several updates being made to some of the existing documents. So the interactive data standards tool, HMIS manual, data dictionary, those 3 items, there will be a small update released very soon, hopefully on the HUD Exchange, just fixing some typos, fixing some, adding some additional clarifications in there. So those are coming soon. The CSV and XML, not HML, schemas are also being updated. Sorry about that typo. We also have some mapping instructions for vendors. So specifically, the question of how gender data is going to be mapped from the FY 2020 to the FY 2022 data standards. We will be providing vendors with those instructions very soon. We will also be providing you and users in general information about back data entry requirements. Those of you that have been around for a while know that sometimes, you have to go back in and update information that's been recorded or add information that, that's new. We'll give you all of that information very soon as well. Federal partner HMIS manuals, so the ESG program manual, COC program manual, VA program manual, all those documents will also be coming out hopefully in the next couple of months or so. Those aren't quite as far along in the development, but anticipated to be out sometime, hopefully August or September. Also, we'll have the updated HMIS project setup tool and HUD and some of their subject matter experts, some of the partners that have been a part of this data standards process are working on developing some race, ethnicity, and gender data collection guidance. So that is all under development at this point too. Hopefully will be out soon, probably in the next couple of months as resources for your communities, collecting the updated data here in those particular elements. Just a little bit to talk about ESG project setup. So currently, SAGE allows for ESG recipients to upload type 6 projects, so CAPER CSVs that are for services only projects. Per the ESG HMIS manual, there's really only one allowable circumstance for a services only project in the ESG program, and that's for legal services providers. However, HUD has found in the course of doing, some data analysis, looking at what's coming in for the ESG program, questions that we get on the AAQ desk, HUD's realizing that there are a lot of communities, a lot of ESG recipients that are, or subrecipients that are setting up services only projects in their HMIS with their ESG funds that are not correct. There are a variety of reasons that these different services only projects are getting set up in HMIS and then uploaded into SAGE. None of which though are right. There shouldn't be all of these other services only projects. So HUD has made the decision that beginning on October 1st of 2021, SAGE will no longer accept any services only project uploads. So no more CAPER uploads that have a type 6 services only project type associated with them. We're telling you this now so that you've got a few months to start working on this and planning for what you're going to do. Again, because October 1st, no more services only projects can be uploaded into SAGE for the ESG program, But so I wanted to just sort of highlight a couple points, remind you to go back and look at the ESG program manual. But, we say this question a lot when we get it through the AAQ, or we have this question a lot through the AAQ desk, around how do I set up a project. The project that you set up in your HMIS should comport with the program component that is being funded. So if there is you're getting services money for emergency shelter, essential services, you're getting shelter operations funding, those should be set up as an emergency shelter project. You don't have to have a services only project for clients residing in a shelter that are getting services. You don't have to have a standalone services project even if they're getting legal services. Those clients are being seen in your shelter. It is sufficient to HUD to just report on those clients in shelter. So similarly, rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, there's only one project type for each of those funding components. If your project is funded under homelessness prevention, the expectation is that there is a homelessness prevention project set up in HMIS. Same with rapid rehousing, same with street outreach. those funding sources should align with the project types in HMIS. This table comes straight out of the ESG manual, so please take a look. If you have any questions, there's some additional information in there. Because legal services is the question we get a lot, especially on the SAGE side, what do I do with these different legal services programs? I feel like I need to set up a separate services only project. HUD has some policy decisions, some policy guidance that they've made. If you've asked a question about this, I'm sure you've received this response in your AAQ from the SAGE desk. So again, in the emergency shelter component, it's the same sort of concept that already exists with emergency shelter funding. If $1 of ESG money goes into an emergency shelter, all the clients in that shelter are reported in a single paper. So if it's, that the city ESG funding is paying for case management and the county ESG funding is paying for the electric bills, okay. So those two funding sources are going into one project in HMIS. There is a single type 1 emergency shelter project set up in HMIS that is used to generate the CAPER for the city and then used to generate the CAPER for the county. You don't need more than that. Keep it simple with just that one shelter project. When you have legal services that are associated with a rapid rehousing project, the expectation would be that the participants of the rapid rehousing project are the ones that are receiving legal services. So again, you wouldn't need to set up a separate standalone services only project because those clients are already being accounted for in your rapid rehousing project. So no need to set up a separate project, just use your rapid rehousing project. It's a little more complex for homelessness prevention. It could be possible that you have set up a homelessness prevention project where someone may only be getting legal services. They're not receiving any other service that necessarily would, necessitate them having been enrolled in HMIS. But if you do have a program that has been designed that way where they're going, being directly referred to an attorney or something as legal services, you'll need to find a way to get those people enrolled into the prevention project in HMIS, but you don't need to set up a separate project. It is still just a prevention project, and if you already have the prevention project set up in HMIS, simply make sure you're enrolling those clients that are getting legal services in that rapid rehousing project. You'll want to make sure, if they are just getting legal services, that you have a relationship with that legal service provider to know when those services end or ended so that you can record the exit information in the HMIS. But again, otherwise, keep it simple. It is just the rapid rehousing project or it is just a homelessness prevention project. Don't create a separate standalone services only project. Scroll bar moving there, so I assume there's questions here. Is there anything, Mary, that we should talk about, or?
I actually no. I think there is one question I'm getting clarification on. The ESG HPRH funding goes directly to the legal services project. It would still need its own service, right?
To a provider, you
ESG.
Still need to have that project set up in HMIS. You would have the prevention project or the rapid rehousing project set up in HMIS. You don't set up a services only project, even if that homeless prevention project is being used just to pay for, legal aid services or whatever it may be. You still set up a prevention project. And then you'll need to, or whoever the subrecipient is, someone will need to work with that legal service provider to make sure that they're recording the correct start and end dates or start and exit dates for that participant.
One important clarification, ESG grant recipients are hearing this information too, right? It's not just the HMIS leads. This is being communicated. Okay.
Yeah, so this will all be updated in the manual when it comes out also. Again, this all goes into effect October 1st. We just wanted to give you this heads up so that you knew this was coming with as much advance notice as we could give you to plan and prepare for that. So again, there's not a services only project type for ESG funding. Street outreach, rapid rehousing, or homelessness prevention.
So Meredith, I'm going to leave those ones we just verbally addressed up on the Q&A screen for you to maybe just type in written responses of what you just said. And it's like kind of a series of 4 there. So I will take over because I think the next slide is mine because we all know already I can't talk and type at the same time. So moving on, thanks Meredith, if you could take those. The next slide is about LSA news. So longitudinal services analysis for those of you that don't know. So we went back through, as we're thinking about the coming months, we of course want to prep you as much as we can for when we do know the dates of deadlines, what the programming updates are going to be for the next reporting year, and there's a lot of work being done on data quality, better tools and tips for successful uploads when we get to that LSA upload period. All of that is what we plan to provide in the September call for this group. So we are anticipating that we'll know enough by then to be able to have a robust conversation with you around LSA. In the meantime, we thought it would be a good reminder for you to go back. We scoured the list of available past webinars on the HUD Exchange, and we pinpointed a few where we talked about data quality issues. It was kind of 2 different feedback sessions. During the December 2020 call, we talked about the commonly asked questions that were happening during the upload process. So we would encourage you to go back and listen to the December 2020 call or focus in on the LSA section because we kind of were in the middle of the upload then and we're talking about what some problems were going on at the time. We also think reviewing the February 2021 call, which was a feedback session. The LSA by that point, the upload deadline had passed, and we were getting into like assessing the data that was submitted, and there was a lot of good information there about data quality improvements that you could make preemptively, right, prior to the upload opening up again. So we anticipate that we're going to know a little more about the programming changes that are going to be happening, the deadlines, timelines, anticipated timelines, and further data quality tools and tips available by the time we talk again in September. But in the meantime, maybe in place of the August meeting next month at the same time, go in and review those December and February slides and presentations, and you can get linked to them through this PowerPoint once we release it to the HUD Exchange. They're also on that same HUD Exchange page. So, moving right along, not seeing any, is there any question either of you, Jesse or Meredith, want to address while we're not too far past the ESG stuff? I know there's a lot of ESG questions there. Or are you good in writing?
Think out loud because I want to be clear about this. There's some questions here about legal service providers, and I want to say it doesn't matter who the recipient or subrecipient of the funding is. The issue at hand is the project type. So regardless of if the funding is going to a direct homeless service provider or to a legal service provider, the funding or the project setup should match the funding component. So if it is a rapid rehousing project and that rapid rehousing project is giving funds to a legal service provider to provide assistance to their rapid rehousing participants, that's fine. You're not going to set up a separate services only project for that legal services provider. You're going to have that information recorded in the rapid rehousing project in HMIS. And then the same thing for a homelessness prevention program. So even again, if the money is directly awarded to the legal service provider, there needs to be a project in HMIS that is a homelessness prevention project that is recording data about those people assisted with those legal services as part of that homelessness prevention project. There was maybe a little confusion about that. I just wanted to be very clear and say that. I'll type it also, but just wanted to say it.
Okay. Yeah. Project typing. It's a huge, huge part of the, the HMIS lead, HMIS System Admin job. So, and it can get kind of complicated. So thanks, Meredith. I think that clears it up, but we'll see what more questions we have. I'm going to go on to the next. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the new webinar platform in September. We'll be moving to Adobe Connect. So if any of you have been participating in the HUD HUD weekly office hours, that's the WebEx platform that's being used there. It's fairly straightforward, and we don't think there'll be much of a technical change, right, for you folks on the front end. We're still going to have the same capabilities and setup that we have now. So there'll still be, all calls muted. There'll be a call-in number if you need it. It'll be audio through your computer. Everything will be recorded. There'll only be a Q&A panel, not a confusing, chat panel and Q&A and questions getting lost in that way. So we've done a pretty thorough exploration of all of or most of the options that were available for us in moving this platform from Adobe Connect to something else. We landed on WebEx, and so when we come back together in September, that's the platform we'll be on. So it'll look different, but it really shouldn't function any different. We are also working on things like closed captioning and faster transcripting and faster posting of our materials to HUD Exchange. So in that regard, we will be potentially changing the format of the PowerPoint slides to make it a little easier and faster to get compliant with accessibility standards that exist for posting to HUD Exchange, so that we can make it move a little faster for you. But that's kind of all in flux, and we will work through those details when we go dark in August and come back in September. So I guess I'm just preparing you for some changes, because sometimes people fear change, and we can prepare a little and then maybe not have it go bad. So that is that. If you have any questions, definitely submit a question right now to the Q&A. We're just we're getting to the end. I thought we would go pretty fast today. We had a lot of topics, but not a lot of material within those topics. So we're coming up on the end of our call. We really want to spend some time getting your questions answered as we can. I will say that there's this kind of set of tools, resources, and particularly presentations that are recorded and available on HUD Exchange. And I went through and kind of tried to highlight the ones that if you've been to NHSDC and had the certificate and received your certificate of like HMIS 101 or Foundations, these are the ones in particular that go into that kind of certification. You're not going to get a certificate right now by just watching them on your own. That's an NHSDC function that may or may not continue to be available in the future. But those trainings that give you that foundation of knowledge of what HMIS is, what project setup should be, a lot of these like project type questions are covered in Project Setup 101 and 201. So please take a moment, and especially since we're going dark in August, you could take some of the time that you might have spent on this call to build up your foundations of HMIS knowledge so that your time on this call with us could be meaningful, so you can submit AAQs for things that don't make sense. I said when in doubt, AAQ it out, so definitely keep that in mind, that as you're going through past materials, you can ask questions of us anytime other than this call and also on this call. But we really want to point out that there's some resources available to elevate your understanding of HMIS kind of on a basic level as needed. And this is also something good to pay attention to if you are onboarding new staff. We know that there is some turnover in our field. And so if you're bringing on new folks and want to give them kind of a day of trainings that are already recorded, that would be a great way to give folks new to your team some foundational knowledge in HMIS. I'm going to click on the resources page because there's just so much that has been recorded and posted or written for you and posted on HUD Exchange for you. So I want to make sure that you know of the latest and greatest stuff that's out there. I think the HMIS Lead Series Tools page is really just top of the list in terms of giving you some of those tools, actual practical tools and products to implement locally and checklists to use when you're trying to figure stuff out. I'm going to pause there. Meredith, Jesse, Fran, what could we continue to talk about verbally? What do we need to go over in more detail with folks? Where are we at with questions? This is a great question. Are there any plans to provide accessibility compliance requirements for HMIS software providers? Marianne, great question. So you all, as the COC leads and HMIS leads, set the real requirements, right, with your contracts with software vendors. I would need to go and scour the 2004 technical standards again to see if there was any accessibility compliance requirements in there. I don't remember off the top of my head, but that's a great AAQ so that we could back your contracting and procurement efforts up with specific guidance that's, either in the Federal Register or in other guidance documents that have been posted over the years. I remember when we procured the last system that I was part of, that accessibility requirement was a requirement that we put into our RFP and our contract. So it really does live, just like a lot of things. HUD puts the onus on COCs to provide oversight and operation of HMIS, which includes the contracts that you get into with your vendors. But again, put in an AAQ, and we'll see if we can get some specific information to back that up. Okay, you guys are so great. Tons of great questions.
Mary, there's a request to see the previous slide.
Sure.
To get back at one.
Heck, yeah. So, Fran, going back to the CARES conference, is this geared towards recipients or subrecipients or both? I think it's both. But what I read was both. You'd want to have recipients and subrecipients participate in that CARES conference. Kristen?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
From Linnell that I sent the wrong answer to, and now I can't find Linnell's question, but it was something about being able to run a services only report in your system and then test it in Sage, and that was a nice feature so that you could see the data quality or something. And I just wanted to say, if you could run a APR on a project, you could do the same thing. If you're just like running samples or testing things, if your system allows for the APR to be run, it would accept it for services only on an APR, and it's the same data quality questions. So that's an option potentially also. Back, Linnell, in case there's anything that can be done there.
I saw that question. So Linnell was saying that she has an SSO project that they've been uploading capers for just to test the data quality, and you're saying you can still do that. Sage isn't going to keep you from testing. It's just not going to accept.
Caper. You can't do it with a caper. That's what I'm saying. But if you're in your system, there's a lot of systems that have like the APR assigned to all projects. You can generate an APR on a project even if that's not technically what you would ever submit. You could do the same thing and just generate an APR and put it in there and see what the data quality for the services only look like.
I have a question here similar to Shanna's on EHV, providing housing, and ESGCV funding, the services. Does the EHV project have to be set up as a PH housing only if the services are not funded by ESG but by another local grant? Can EHV be set up as PSH instead of housing only so we can avoid co-enrollments in PH and SSO? So I think, Errol, and I know that what I replied to Shanna's question was, check out the concurrent consecutive setup. Now, remember too that EHV housing projects may or may not be using HMIS, but we have a specific EHV project setup document as well in the list of resources on the next slide. You can do a search for it on HUD Exchange. So I think there's detail here that you're going to want to review the guidance we've already put out on both of these items, on co-funding with ESGCV, that's the concurrent consecutive resource, and EHV project setup, if you're going to do EHV data collection, HMIS, and recommendations around there. That document is out there as well, and you're going to kind of have to pull out the guidance that is relevant to your question, and then if that still doesn't help, Errol, you're going to want to put in an AAQ so we can make it a little clearer. Drew said something amazing. I can see that in the comments, but I didn't see what the thing Drew said was. Okay, EHV. If the housing authorities are not using HMIS at all, do we still need to have the project be considered an HMIS project for the HIC? So we do have an answer for that, and it's not a complete answer, but what we know at this point let me go find it. HUD anticipates requiring COCs to include EHV projects in the HIC, beginning with the 2022 HIC. Now, with that, and then that question then becomes, if it's a housing project in the HIC and they're not participating in HMIS, right, and I get dinged on future funding because I have a lower participation rate, et cetera. So again, HUD can't speak to, make sure I'm sending this to the right place. HUD can't speak to future funding decisions or impacts, but we do anticipate that the EHV projects will need to be on your 2022 HIC, and if they're not participating in HMIS, that's the case. You would mark them as not participating in HMIS on your HIC. But every project, housing project, that is on your HIC should have project descriptor data elements in HMIS. That's a minimum that we've set both in the HMIS data standards and the HIC notices, right? So HMIS needs to have at least PDDEs on every project that you're reporting on the HIC. Whether they then add client data, that project adds client data or not, to HMIS, is that indication of whether they're participating in HMIS or not. And we believe that more information will come out down the road as to how participation rates are going to be adjusted or affected by what we know right now, which is that EHV projects should be on your HIC. Okay. I could just keep talking. Can you please put the link to the EHB slide? I don't know what the link to the EHB slide is. Oh, to the EHB guidance. Yes, we will go find the recently posted EHB in HMIS. Oh, here it is.
It's in someone's
That
response.
link. Yeah. I'm like half answering questions and writing, and then I skip and do something else. Okay. Okay, here is the link to the EHB guidance, and Lisa, you're saying, do we set up projects that don't use HMIS, including those using comparable HMIS systems? I feel like you might be asking about Mary, PIT, and what I just said, which is all projects that are on your HIC need to have at least PBDEs in HMIS. That's a minimum standard within the HIC notice, and within the HMIS data standards. So the answer, if I'm assuming that's what you're asking about correctly, the answer is yes. Even DV projects or agencies, VSTs, that don't use HMIS, right, don't participate in HMIS and aren't allowed to, but are on your HIC because they're housing projects that are serving folks in your community, you put DV projects in HMIS in just the project descriptor data elements. So you have a record of all the projects that are housing projects in your continuum, but not all of them, and certainly not VSPs, have the client data in HMIS with PIIs, et cetera, et cetera. So do we set projects that don't use HMIS, including those using comparable HMIS systems? The answer is yes, if you're talking about HIT stuff.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Were you not heard?
No, apparently not. I was trying to tell you that I posted the link to that document. I was trying to tell you I had a question. None of those things worked. I feel like maybe you've addressed it now. I don't know, my headphones stopped working, I guess. But there was a question whether HUD has any sense of what HMIS reporting on EHB will look like. I don't know that there is going to be HMIS reporting on EHB, right? Because it's not required to be.
So what we know, I mean, it's a really kind of nuanced thing. Like, you may decide as an HMIS, as a community, that EHB data on the participants getting, or clients getting EHB vouchers is going to go in your HMIS, and that's all good and well. You can make those decisions because HUD puts that power in your hand to make those decisions. But it's not a requirement, because remember, the PHAs have their own data collection responsibilities for the folks that they're housing with their vouchers. So that data collection is happening at the PHA side, and that's where the reporting on EHB is going to come from. The thing that's in the EHB notice is about PHAs have to use referrals from the COC and coordinate with the COC and the coordinated entry system to find the folks that will get the EHB voucher. So what we have said is that you may be asked as a COC or as an HMIS to find, or to count or to report on the referrals that have been provided from the COC CE system to the EHB, PHA projects, PHA agencies that are running the EHB programs. So the COC may have a data recording kind of collection requirement. But overriding that, so we don't know for sure because I don't think the PHA reporting requirements have been established necessarily, or how that COC referral is going to fit into that reporting. But overriding that idea is that not everybody is using HMIS for coordinated entry. That's not a requirement either, right? That HMIS be the system that is capturing all of your coordinated entry referrals. So it becomes kind of a threading of the needle. If I'm a HUD-funded CE-SSO project, I am required to use HMIS for my CE data collection. I will be required to submit an APR, right, about my CE data from HMIS sometime soon. And therefore, I can also use HMIS to track my referrals to EHV because I'm using HMIS already for CE. That's one instance where you're now a COC who, if a PHA asked you for how many referrals did you give us to the EHV vouchers, you have that number because you're using HMIS already for your COC-funded CE project. But you may also have opted in because HMIS maybe makes the most sense for folks in your community as the system that captures your CE data. So you also might have the data needed to talk about the referrals provided from your CE system to the EHV programs, and HMIS, has a clear spot in it in that 4.20 data element to capture, or it will by October 1, capture that referral to EHV. So you would also, as a community that's not required to use HMIS for CE, but as a community that is using HMIS for CE, you would also have that data to provide if the time comes to provide it. Other than that, keeping track of your EHV referrals for your coordinated entry system is something that should be happening now. That is the expectation. So because it's a requirement for the PHAs to grab their referrals from the COC's CE system. So figuring out, who's recording and reporting and keeping track of all that is important. And we've provided guidance to help figure out how you could do that in HMIS.
So just a couple follow-ups on that, Mary, just because there are some additional questions that came in. Should EHV referrals through the coordinated entry system be reported through the coordinated entry caper? There's not a coordinated entry caper. So it would be in the, like Mary was saying, if you had a SSOCE grant and you have to record that information in HMIS, there is a SSOCE APR, how about that acronym test for you, that you will have to submit, but not the caper. And then the question of, go, Mary, what were you going to say?
No, I've seen the guidance. I don't know if it's out there yet or not, but where we even took that CE APR and you could, if you needed to build a custom report or something because you're not using HMIS, but you want to do some sort of reporting and make it, I don't know, we tried to even go a little bit further and give you some reporting using your kind of APR format, right, to pull the data out where you could if you're using HMIS. But it's all that if you're using HMIS.
Right. Which leads into the next question, but EHVs won't just be on the HIC, right? They would be included in the LSA and SPMs. So as it stands now, if those projects are in HMIS, they would be included in those reports. If those projects are in HMIS, you're collecting that data.
Jesse.
They will not be in the LSA because the LSA does not include PH housing only. But they would be in your SPMs if you have client-level data. There is not any logic that would exclude these projects from being in there.
So Gaither has a question. If a person with a disability experiences homelessness in COCA for over a year, then relocates to COCB, is it okay for COCB not to count that person's time homeless if they weren't experiencing homelessness in COCB? No. There's no restriction on counting homelessness in a particular jurisdiction. It is when they were homeless, they would indicate that's when their homelessness started, regardless
that
of
was
the
an
COC.
AAQ. It was a slightly different AAQ, but I feel like we've seen that before in the AAQs. So if you want an official, thorough answer, put that in the AAQs. But yeah, I agree with Meredith. Approximate date homeless began is when their homelessness started, regardless of jurisdiction.
Speaking of the coordinated entry APR, when, where, that's my favorite question today. So there will be updated
Wendy.
Updated coordinated entry specs will be posted very soon to the HUD Exchange. There are currently coordinated entry APR specs on the HUD Exchange, but they don't have the updates for the 2 new referral event options. So that will be updated in there. The go live date is still October 1st. It is expected that vendors will be able to test their reports in Sage in September.
I'll take that SSBF EHA question because that's just my favorite. So the question is, Joan, thank you. Do you anticipate that SSBF emergency housing assistance EHA will continue to be required in the HIC PIT and LSA in the future? If so, is there any plan to require SSBF programs to set up a separate EHA ES project in HMIS instead of inputting EHA as a service? The VA has come out strongly on this one, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. They have reviewed the HIC notice and agree that even though we're wanting to count EHA veterans, EHA served veterans in hotel motel without, in an RRH project without a housing move-in date as a sheltered person on your PIT count, they will not be requiring SSBF grantees to set up emergency shelter projects to capture that data so that it aligns with, between LSA and HIC. So, no, the VA is not going to have a third project type anytime soon for EHA vouchers. They actually anticipate that EHA, which was an extremely small portion of the services provided by SSBF grantees prior to the pandemic, that EHA will go back down and be a very small part of SSBF service provision in the future. But in the meantime, while it is being used for purposes of serving folks during the pandemic, it will continue to kind of be out of line with generally what we do is to make sure, and I just said it, if it's in HMIS, if it's in your HIC, it's in HMIS, and you have a project kind of that matches. We are providing guidance. So in terms of the matching up, Jesse, maybe you could say this better than me, but in terms of LSA error checking, because at some point in the future here, we're going to get LSA files full of rapid rehousing data, right? The EHA services are in rapid rehousing in HMIS, and that's not changing. And the counts of people in shelter include people in EHA that aren't going to be found in emergency shelter projects in the LSA files. We are going to account for that in the error checking process of the LSA uploads, because it's not going to change on the HIC side. We still want to know EHA has people as sheltered, and it's not going to change on the HMIS setup side. VA doesn't want SSBF grantees to have a third project to enter data into, and so what we need to do is make sure that we're not dinging you for having that discrepancy. But we will. account for it. Did I say that right, Jesse?
Yep.
Thank you.
Of course.
You guys are so good. Okay. Are we supposed to treat 100% of EHV beds as if they were all for literally homeless on the HIC? I thought they were all for literally homeless. I thought 100% EHV supposed to come out of the referral process and be for literally homeless. No? Am I wrong?
Well, I wonder, Mary, because folks that are in rapid rehousing, I believe, are still eligible, so they would not be
right.
Exactly.
Literally homeless, but is it kind of that interim housing thing where they're, because they had, I don't know. No.
No, it's available to help people who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, fleeing, or were recently homeless or have a high risk of housing instability. So there's different sort of criteria in there, and I think they're saying that if someone is at risk of homelessness and goes into an EHV bed, you wouldn't count that. Or I guess that is their question. Would you count that?
Oh, per HIC. Okay, I get it. I see what you're saying. Because we don't put prevention beds on the HIC. Yeah. So then, no, you wouldn't put prevention beds on the HIC. That's still true. You wouldn't consider EHV vouchers, right? In the case of, you guys look like I'm saying something wrong.
I feel like we should bring that one offline and come back to you on that.
How about, Jack, if you could put in an AAQ on that and we can circle back around with you on AAQ. Okay.
I'm hoping one of you can clarify. I thought that the EHVs were supposed to be PH housing only. Even if you were to pair services with them, that would still be the official HMIS project type. Is that your understanding? Fran, are you still with us, perchance?
Is this Kalia?
I was muted. Sorry. Say that again.
Is it correct that the EHV vouchers should be in HMIS as PH housing only, regardless of if a community were to pair supportive services with it as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You guys are doing a great job at this Stump the TA provider today.
Yeah.
They're really bringing your A game.
Today.
Let's pull up the guidance because I thought we actually.
Yeah.
I mean, the guidance
we had addressed it. So let me just read real fast.
Yeah. The guidance does say select project type PH housing only in the document that was released last week.
Okay.
Yep. PH housing only, even in the case of services paired with.
I don't believe we addressed that point.
We don't specifically say it though. So, smart people, I'm going to say it again, put in AAQ, and if we need to come back and clarify a little further, we can. If we can also, what we can do with AAQs, right, is run them back up the chain, say, are you sure you meant this? And then the answer is, yeah, that's absolutely what we expect. CUC funded RH projects able to continue providing stability services with RH funded case management to their clients who transfer their subsidy to an EHB. Okay. So you're continuing to do the services only side of the RRH, but they're now residing in the housing portion of EHB. How does that work with dual enrollments? Again, if you're saying dual enrollments in terms of all those LSA errors, the PH housing only project doesn't show up in the LSA. So I think they would continue to be enrolled in the RH project if you're continuing to serve them with RH funding. Certainly the SSVF grant has a version of this, right? As SSVF funds are used post-VASH voucher, the SSVF clients remain in those RH programs for some period of time, up to 6 months, I believe, after the client is housed by the VASH voucher. So in that case, right, we would account for the allowability of that type of setup. Now, is it eligible to do? I don't know for sure. Can you use RH? It kind of depends on the RH funding. You said COC funded RH. So can COC funded RH projects continue to serve folks with services after a client has moved into permanent housing? I don't know that answer off the top of my head, but in terms of looking at the data from an analytic point of view and understanding that that's not a dual enrollment, i.e. in the ways we think about dual enrollments as errors, I would say yes. You'll need to check your COC funded RH project eligibility as to whether you can continue to provide stability services post EHV. Yeah, Robert, that's basically just what I was responding to. So you said, I'm thinking of pairing ESG RH with EHV. If I'm tracking EHV and HMIS, would I be entering the clients into the ESH RH project and the EHV project? This would cause them to show up in both projects on the HIC. So I will say, again, like kind of think about what we do with VASH housing vouchers and how, SSVF in some cases helps the client get into a VASH voucher and then provide services post. That's an eligible activity, allowable through the SSV funding, and so the RH enrollment continues on even post-housing enrollment in some other project. Now, EHV housing projects aren't necessarily using HMIS, right? So would there be a dual enrollment? Not if you're not tracking all the other HV data. Is your RH project that you're thinking of using, the funding for this RH project that you're thinking of using, allowing you, is it eligible to use services post-housing for an RH client who's been housed? That's an eligibility question you need to figure out. And if it's EHV vouchers and you're using HMIS to track EHV vouchers, but it's set up as a project type PH housing only project, according to the guidance, it should be, that won't end up in your LSA files. So even then you don't have necessarily even a dual enrollment error, if I'm understanding this dual enrollment question to be about LSA errors coming up. You wouldn't see those in the LSA upload because that PH housing only project isn't in LSA files. But if it is, like a VASH voucher might be included in an LSA upload, and the SSVF RH project that's paying for the client's post-housing for some supportive service work after the voucher's been taken up, that would come through as a dual enrollment, but it wouldn't be an error in the LSA because we account for situations where that stuff is okay. So dual enrollments in HMIS and in the LSA upload process are meant to get you to a data quality point of like, well, the same project type, right? Like a PSH and a PSH at the same time. That's like one body, two beds. That doesn't logically make sense. So dual enrollment is a little different than managing your fund sources, the eligibility of your fund sources, what your funders are requiring you to track, what's in HMIS, what's not in HMIS, right? Blending your funding sources. All of that is like slightly different, and I know overlaps with dual enrollment errors for the LSA, but there is consideration that is attempted to be taken when funding sources say that's okay to do. We don't want to call those out as errors. Or if they're called out as just data quality errors, it's easily explainable in terms of, well, the funding source says this is okay to do, so it's not an error to us. Okay, good enough.
I stuck a resource out there, and I stuck it on Robert's questions because it was there. But there is a document it's a funding brief for ESG, ESGCV, and rapid rehousing. I thought this was just EHV. I just maybe posted the wrong thing. Yeah. It's under the EHV funding briefs, and it was released July 1st, and I thought it was related to EHV, and yeah, there we go. To address that question of pairing with case management and whatnot, that resource is very new, so that may be of help to you.
So all these questions, I know that if we don't reply to them in writing and send it back out to you guys, they don't show up on your participant view, and that's a bummer because we've been verbally answering a lot of stuff. When we go to do the posting of all the materials from this webinar, we make sure to go and actually provide written answers to the things that we've answered verbally, or we've been getting better at doing that. I'm not going to say we've always been great at that, but we're getting better at, we will, whatever we said, right, and didn't write down for you on the call, those questions don't go away. They make it into the Q&A document, and we put the official answer in there. And also, you can always take your question if you feel like it didn't get verbally addressed and you want to continue to engage in the conversation. The AAQ desk is the way to do that. So submit your question to the AAQ if you want it to be answered. Oh, Robert, okay. You were asking about the HIC rather than the LSA. Seems like people would get counted twice, once in RH and once in EHV. Once in RH and once in EHV. On the HIC. You don't count, trying to kind of be careful about, because there's the PIT count.
But you would potentially be overstating your inventory.
Let put in the AAQ, Robert, so we can, because we don't have all of our inventory experts on this call. There are a few other team members that can make sure we are really clear on. And again, the answer right now with EHV is we anticipate that EHV vouchers need to be on your HIC, but that doesn't mean that we've really worked out all of the details of what that means for and how it interplays with other projects on the HIC, et cetera. So definitely put that in as an AAQ for us, so we can make sure to get clear on that guidance. Oh, that's a good idea, Lauren. I will think about that. Can AAQs tied to this session potentially be sent out with meeting materials? I have a dream. I have a dream that the, sorry, that Rapunzel song just got stuck in my head. I'm seeing people dancing right now. The AAQs, I wish were more accessible, and I kind of have a dream that we would pull AAQ answers out on a regular basis. We've gotten better at it amongst the TA folks over the time that I've been in this position, but I really would love HMIS leads. So that's a great idea to think about what was asked specifically as a follow-up to this session and include that as a resource that's posted to the HUD Exchange post-webinar. So that's ideas now generating in my head. Okay. So if we have one set of RH pages in HMIS for case management, other pages for TFA, but it's one RH program, which page gets the bed inventory? So that is a very specific question about your software and how to set up inventory tracking for HIC purposes in your software. So I'm going to say, Laura, enter an AAQ or before you enter an AAQ, check back with your software vendor and see if they have an answer to that question first. Okay, Joan is following up on the SSCF EHA on the COC application. I can't really talk about application. Let's see what on the CSE application, when we're asked about our HMIS bed coverage, will the fact that EHA is counted as non-participating on the HIC negatively impact how our ES coverage is regarded by HUD? Can't speak to future funding, can't talk about funding applications, can't talk about that at all in any way. I mean, I think in the notice though there was, so if you look back at maybe in the submission guidance or in the HIC notice when we address SSBF EHA, there was some information about whether to count that as participating in HMIS or not. So can't speak to whether it's going to negatively impact you or positively impact you on any future funding. But I know that participating versus non-participating for EHA was addressed in the either submission guidance or past notice, Joan.
And I can say, there's many factors that are going into our competitions, right? We have over a year of COVID response. We have all of these different very fast-moving initiatives that have happened. There's this type of situation. So it's just going to be a very different approach this time around, and we're being very conscientious of that. So I think you'll see that reflected in, how we manage this going forward, but we can't talk about any specifics. We can't talk about how we score things. We can't talk about any of that. We're not permitted to. But we do think about these things as we go through developing our process. So just know that all of this is kind of part of our discussions that we have. We want to be as flexible as we can in every place that we can when we're working on these things.
Okay. I think I'm going to bring us to a close here. Just one last reminder that our new HUD Exchange webpage is live. You can find information about upcoming webinars. You can visit past webinar material. You can sign up for the HUD Exchange mailing list. I took those little screenshots from that single landing page on the HUD Exchange that we have shared with you in multiple places. So definitely go find that page. Anybody who said that they didn't get the message about the new EHV guidance posted in early July, I'm going to double check on that list and just make sure we're aligned with that list that you can sign up for HUD Exchange. Feel free to sign up multiple times. It'll probably tell you that you're already signed up, and that's a good thing. So next meeting is not August 18th. I have crossed that one out. We're going dark in August. We're making a transition to the new platform, maybe possibly a new PowerPoint format. We're getting everything geared up to come back at you in September with hopefully some more LSA information, any follow-up that we need to do from these questions and answers today we will do, and we will just kick off the almost fall time frame. We're almost in fall, people, so enjoy that August. Enjoy your last month of summer, and we will see you next time. So Meredith, you ready?
Yes. Yep. Ready.
Why did the optometrist move to Mississippi?
I don't know.
Because it has the most eyes. MISSIPPI.
There you go.
Okay. Talk to you soon, you guys.
Thanks,
Have
everyone.
a great one. Bye.
Bye.